Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome to the third webinar in our series supporting endpoint assessment. This one slightly different. It's the first sector-specific webinar that we're going to be running. Thanks very much for those of you who've joined us. I'm sure there'll be more coming through the session. But today what we're going to do is we're going to look at hospitality assessment plans in a bit of detail, look at how Innovate Awarding are going to tackle them, and give you some specifics really related to the information that we have currently from People First, and also some of the information that we have in terms of the way in which we will deliver these particular assessments. Now, just some introductions. Myself, my name's Andy McNeill. I'm Head of Assessment Services here at Innovate Awarding. Joining me today is Kathy Smith, Business Development and Operations Director. Now, we'll have plenty of opportunity for you to ask us questions. For those of you new to the GoToWebinar system, you'll see it's pretty easy to use. Please do kind of send in your questions as they come to you. We'll have some opportunities to stop to consider some of them during the presentation, and also anything that Kathy can specifically deal with, she will respond to you directly. If we don't have the answer today, which is almost certainly going to be the case for some of your questions, of course what we'll do is we'll add them to our FAQs for the sector. And we'll make sure that we get the answer, whether it's through our own development or actually through the system, through working with People First. Just to give everyone an idea as to the sort of people that we have on board today, a good selection of people have registered from FE colleges, private training providers, employers, other assessment organisations, and I'm sure others that I've not mentioned. So just moving on, let's tackle what it is we're going to look at in today's session. Firstly, we'll give you a little bit of a brief background to Innovate Awarding. Those of you who've attended some of our more generic webinars will know that some of this information, but we won't spend too long on it, but it's good for you to kind of understand our background. We'll look at the endpoint assessment journey for the hospitality assessment plans for which we're approved. And we'll give you a more in-depth look at the assessment methodologies that have been identified in those plans. Now, it's fair to say that the hospitality sector has come up with quite a diverse range of assessment methodologies, some of which are quite different and quite challenging. So actually what we'll do is we'll go into a little bit of depth from what we know at the moment. And we'll look at the initial approach that we have to deliver an endpoint assessment for hospitality. And of course, this is something which we're working on at the moment, many different work strands, and obviously lots of things that are in progress as we speak. We'll give you an idea as to what the assessment workforce will look like for hospitality, and as we go through, we'll give you a real kind of in-depth indication as to what support we'll provide, not just for the apprentices taking the endpoint assessment, but also for the training providers and for the employers who are supporting the apprentice through this process. And we'll also start to look at the future webinar support for the sector itself, and ask you what it is you would want us to help you with as you move into the delivery of these standards. So how will the session run? As I said, we'll be giving you information that's based on our approach to delivering the assessment plans that have been published for the sector. We'll have plenty of breaks in the presentation for you to ask questions, and pauses for us to ask you questions as well. We've got some polls and some specific questions that we want you to kind of answer for us. And at the end, we'll give you the contact details for you to contact us and ask any questions that you have, and also perhaps to discuss in more depth our pricing and any of the requirements that we have. So a bit about who we are. Innovate Awarding is an independent limited company within the Lifetime Group, and we're a recognised awarding organisation, as many of you will know, regulated by Ofqual, and Qualifications Wales and CCEA since 2015-16. Ofqual since 2009. We're financially strong with independent corporate governments, and the reason that's important is that's a real key question for the SFA, for all of the organisations that are actually applying for the status as an apprentice assessment organisation. And of course we're on the register, and we'll tell you for what standards we're approved so far, and also a little bit about our kind of rolling programme of submissions to SFA as part of that process. We have over 30,000 learners registered in 2015-16, which puts us at the top, within the top 40 of UK awarding organisations. And currently we're offering apprenticeship framework qualifications in a range of the sectors that we're talking about today. As mentioned, this is a rolling programme of applications, and we're at the start of it. We're delighted with where we are at the moment. But as more assessment plans become approved and ready for delivery, we will be submitting more submissions to the SFA for approval, and this is just an indication of some of the sectors which we've already prioritised and we'll be looking to work in. In terms of the sectors that we are currently approved for, 14 apprenticeship standards to date, with 2 more that have already been submitted to SFA and we're awaiting response on. Crossing 6 sectors, as you can see, and obviously for today's purposes, we're currently approved for 3 of the hospitality standards to date, which is Commis chef, hospitality team member at level 2, and hospitality supervisor at level 3, and also senior chef production cooking. Is a standard that we have with the SFA now under consideration, and hopefully we'll know soon as to our progress on that. In terms of what we're going to cover today, we will include the senior chef production cooking within our presentation, because actually it's best to look at all 4 of the hospitality sectors as one, hospitality standards as one together. And just a little bit about what endpoint assessment is. I'm sure for you signing up today, many of you know this already, but just to reiterate, assessment plans are designed by employer groups for their industry, and in the purpose, with respect of hospitality, People First being at the heart of this, working with quite a diverse employer group that ranges across the sector. It must be delivered by a registered apprentice assessment organisation, for which Innovate Awarding is one, and the key thing here is that organisation is independent from the training of the apprentice and the on-programme learning. Now, the assessment itself is holistic. It takes an overview of the apprentice performance at the end of their training period. So the apprentice has to be deemed ready for the endpoint assessment before they're actually kind of transferred into that assessment journey, and we'll talk through the assessment journey very soon. Assessment methods vary by standard, although across hospitality what we'll see is there's quite a lot of similarity, and what we'll try and do as we talk through today is kind of bring out some of the differences, but also some of the common themes that run across all of the standards. And the final point, and one of the big changes, is the results are now graded, and we will touch on that today, and it's a big part of our support proposition moving forward. We won't go into it into an enormous depth, but we'll give you an idea as to what that means in respect of these hospitality standards. Okay, so before we get into the detail, I just wanted to kind of give you an idea as to what our proposition will look like for customers working with Innovate Awarding on these standards in hospitality. Now, our costs, we've been working hard to have indicative costs ready for customers, and we've really progressed well, and we have the opportunity now to speak to customers about our costs, and they will be clear and transparent. There'll be no hidden extras in there. And equally, there's no upfront registration fee. What we do want to do is ensure that learners or apprentices are registered on our systems as soon as possible, but we won't charge an upfront registration fee until the gateway process begins for that apprentice. And all of this will happen in a new IT system for which all stakeholders will have access and different kind of access ability within that system. This is in development. We're designing it completely from scratch as a bespoke system that meets all of the requirements of all of the stakeholders who are involved in this process. We'll also have a dedicated endpoint assessment manager who is responsible for hospitality. This is a key part of our approach. They will take on the lead for the sector. They'll be the go-to person for customer inquiries. They'll manage our assessment workforce, all of whom will be qualified, and they'll also manage the process of allocation and training and standardisation. We've identified the need for support materials to be clear, easy to use, but also available as early as possible within the training process. And we'll have a full package of support materials and training that will be available from May and phased into availability during the first year of delivery. As well as the certification for the apprentice that comes at the end of the endpoint assessment journey, we'll also be providing e-certificates for all component assessments that happen during the process, as well as making sure that we talk with our customers on an ongoing basis. Okay, so we're going to now dig a little bit deeper into the hospitality assessment plans and look at some of the key points that you as customers will need to know in terms of what the apprentice will be expecting through the endpoint assessment journey with Innovate Awarding. So what we've got on screen now is a diagram that looks at the journey from start to finish, from gateway to completion and certification. And this covers all of the 4 standards we've talked about so far: hospitality team member, hospitality supervisor, senior chef production cooking, and Commis chef. Now, clearly, assessment will not start for the standards we were approved on for a while yet, but what I think it is quite far advanced, and our support package for our customers is vital. So we thought long and hard about how we support the apprentice to be ready for this process to begin. Now, how long will the process take? Now, across all of these standards, the maximum is 2 months for all of the assessment activity, from the gateway and the apprentice being signed off as ready, to the final professional discussion, the grading, and the completion. Okay, so that's a 2-month maximum process. And what we'll be doing to support customers through that is actually working on providing indicative assessment plans that show what this will look like in a diagrammatical format, and that accounts for the apprentice and the assessor preparation and customer feedback. There is no one-size-fits-all for this approach, but there will be guidance that helps to support our customers in terms of how we will deliver the endpoint assessment for each of these standards. Now, the gateway is where the training provider, the employer, and the apprentice essentially ensures that the apprentice is ready for the endpoint assessment journey to start. Now, for the purposes of this, there will be an assessment readiness form that is completed through that meeting, and that will be sent to Innovate Awarding before we begin the planning meeting. Now, the gateway not only ensures that the apprentice is ready to begin the endpoint assessment journey, that they're competent and will be prepared for the assessments in question, but also that the English and Maths components that are identified in the assessment plans will be completed, and this will be logged on that same form and provided to Innovate. Now, the planning meeting is where our assessors will confirm the schedule, talk about the expectations of the assessments, and try and ease any tension there may be in the apprentice. Now, it cannot take place until the assessor has received the readiness form, which should be a week in advance of the meeting. Therefore, we'll be asking for this to be sent as soon as possible to ensure that that process is not delayed. One of the things we're working on is building video conferencing into our systems that can and will, where possible, be utilised for the planning meeting. All of the scheduling will take place within our IT system, and that will be accessible by employers, by training providers, and by the apprentice, and obviously by the endpoint assessor. And that's where all of that activity will take place as far as possible. And one of the things we look to do is ensure that we will have assessors that are allocated to particular apprentices as soon as possible within their training. Now, that doesn't mean that the assessor will have direct contact with the apprentice, but does help us to plan both regionally and in terms of time. The planning meeting is also the point where the endpoint assessor will look at a 2-page synopsis of the business project for approval. And for most of the standards that we're looking at today, that business project is a key element. For the Commis chef standard, there's a culinary challenge that actually is instead of the business project. But we'll look at that in detail as well. And I'm not going to talk about all of the assessment methodologies here, but we will be covering some of the key aspects as we go through the presentation. Okay, so the planning meeting is important on 2 fronts. It allows for us to deliver effective and reliable assessments, and also to ensure that the apprentice is best prepared. But it also allows us to inform people first, who are the external quality assurance body for these standards, as to the schedule that we have, and that allows them to plan any external quality assurance activity that's going to be carried out related to Innovate Awarding delivering this endpoint assessment. So what I want to do now is just to talk about a little bit about the order in which these assessments happen. Now, for many standards, there isn't any guidance related to which assessments have to take place and when. But for the purposes of hospitality, what we see is that actually the professional discussion, and this makes sense on a number of different levels, professional discussion is always at the end of the assessment process. However, there is no order in terms of the other assessment components that take place. So what I wanted to do is actually to try and get a little bit of interactivity as early as possible, but to also try and get some of your own viewpoints just at the start, before we've gone into the detail, as to which of these assessments should take place first and which should take place last, whilst considering that professional discussion will always be at the end of the process. So what I'm going to do is just launch a poll which asks, of the 3 assessments that have been listed, which should be at the start of the process. So you should now see in front of you a poll which is in progress. and already we see some responses coming in. So I'm going to give 1 minute for you to be filling this in. Half the audience now have voted. And this will give us a good chance to see what you think, just on the face of it, should be delivered when, in terms of this process. And then hopefully, all things going well, once I've talked through all of the assessment components, we'll ask the same question to see if anyone's views have changed. So last 10 seconds on that. We've got 83% of the audience have voted, so 85% now. So we will basically look at that. So 57% of the audience have seen the MCQ on-screen test taking place at the start of the process. We have practical observation in second place, with 30% of the audience thinking that will be the best assessment to take place at the start of the process, and then the smallest amount, 14%, looking at the business project. Now we're going to just close that, and then I'm going to open the next one, which, as you can see, is very similar, but we'd like to know which you think should be delivered last, just for us to start to look at this in terms of our planning, but also to get a view based on what you know now. And again, same approach. We'll give you about 45 seconds on this, and then we'll move on to the next slide. So, looking at the responses now, quite an even split here, unsurprisingly given the responses from the last question, but 43%, I think the business project will be reflected 42% split between the business project and the practical observation as the final assessment in the process. If possible, and I'm not sure the polls work this way, but we'll try and run those again, and at the end, see if anyone's views have changed in respect of that. Okay, so let's start to dig a little bit deeper into some of the assessment components that have been identified by the employer group, and how we're going to deal with it within Innovate in terms of the delivery of these endpoint assessments. Now, multiple choice tests essentially are tests that are externally set and marked by Innovate Awarding, and they're included within all of the standards that we're talking about today. Now, these will be delivered on screen, and they'll be scheduled on demand for apprentices, and they can even be taken on site or in an appropriate assessment centre, as long as those assessment centres or the employer premises meet the requirements of Innovate and obviously of People First in terms of what they've set us in terms of guidelines. And of course, as part of our guidance and our documentation available to our customers, all of that information will be provided. Additionally, we'll have a number of different policies in place for special considerations and reasonable adjustments, and the key for us there is to make sure they're available to our customers as early as possible, so that planning and preparation can take place in terms of the assessments that have to happen. The question banks for the on-screen tests, and it's important to realise here that there's more information that we're receiving from People First in terms of test specifications and other guidance from the external quality assurer. But those question banks will cover the knowledge and skills that have been identified in the standard, and these will be weighted equally. We'll be complying with that common approach that is set by People First, and of course we'll be providing a number of different elements of guidance and support as to how the assessments work, how the on-screen tests work, but also exemplar material in terms of practice questions, mock papers, and a variety of different other support material that will be available from May the 1st and then phased into to our customers over the course of 6 to 9 months in the first year. Questions themselves, they'll be scenario based and some will require solutions to a problem, but they will all be multiple choice. So they'll be choosing from a selection of answers. And we're working on our customer service standards for our feedback in terms of the responses to those tests. But for fully on-screen multiple choice questions, we expect that feedback to be quick. It will be automated marking. Of course, we'll be using the very best systems to run those tests. As I talked about, we're working on our support material, and those assessment professionals involved in our development processes will be developing an initial small bank of questions for each of these 4 standards from May 2017. And then, as discussed, we'll have a further resource through the first 9 months of delivery from May 2017. And this will give us a full bank of support material before the endpoint assessment process starts in 2018. Now, just some of the specifics in terms of the standards that we're looking at today. The main difference actually occurs in terms of the time allocation that is available for each of the standards. The 2 level 2 standards, team member and Commis chef, there's 90 minutes for which the apprentice will have to take the test. And for the level 3, hospitality supervisor and the senior chef, 2 hours, which includes a 30-minute reading time. And as discussed, that will be both available for taking on the premises or actually off premises in an assessment centre. Now, just to talk through what our offer looks like. Our on-screen testing will be easy to use. We'll be able to provide analysis of performance against the standard. We've talked about the support offer that's in place. And just an important additional thing to consider, for all multiple choice tests, we'll have a free resit as standard. Now, obviously, through our kind of in-depth and accessible support material, we hope to limit the requirements for resits, because the apprentices will be as prepared as they possibly be. But in those circumstances when perhaps the learners, the apprentices had a bad day or perhaps been a bit tense, they will have that free resit that is built in through our offer. Okay, moving on. We're just going to now pick up on the second of the assessment approaches that we've identified within our assessment journey, and that's practical observation. And this is perhaps where we see the most differences in approaches between the standards. And I'm not going to go into depth on every single practical observation that's offered. I'll try and actually give you some insight as to what some of the kind of the common approaches are that run across them, and then just pull out some of the specific detail, just some of the key points that really kind of differentiate between the assessment plans for different standards. What I would encourage you to do, if you haven't already done so, is to actually go and have a look at the People First website, look at the assessment plans, and read through in detail some of those plans that have been produced in relation to the standards that you're interested in. But most of this information should be of use also. So practical observations taken in the workplace. And our assessors will work to ensure that the most appropriate schedule for this can take place. Often we will have specific guidance in the assessment plan on a sector level that of course we'll adhere to, but the practical observation is designed to provide the best opportunity to observe overall competence in a holistic way. And when we look at the detail, what you can see initially is the way that's been applied is through the timings that have been allocated for each of the standards. So you'll see that for each of them, there's quite an extensive length of time where an assessor will be on the premises assessing the apprentice in the related standards, ranging from 2 to 4 hours, as you'll see. And whilst there can be a split, that's obviously quite a demanding time allocation for a practical observation to take place. And you'll see that actually the assessment plans do give guidance as to where those observations can be split between, so for instance, for hospitality supervisor, you can split between two hours for preparation, 2 hours for service. But the important thing to realise there is that's still going to be happening on the same day. It's advised that actually that assessment will take place in the premises on the same day. It's just that split that can be incorporated if required. So as I said, all observations will be scheduled by Innovate based on a 2-week schedule that will be provided by the apprentice and the employer. Planning is vital, and we mentioned this at the start, as that allows the quality assurance activity to occur, but it also allows for the observation to be run at an appropriate time, and that needs to reflect typical working conditions for that apprentice, so avoiding low levels of trading. And equally for some specifics that we want to pull out for why that's important, hospitality team member will require some element of customer interaction. So there's no point in assessing the apprentice at a time where no customers are likely to be on the employer premises. And that scheduling must allow for the apprentice to also have the best chance to demonstrate all aspects of the standard. Therefore giving them the best chance to achieve at the level in which they are best suited. Most of these observations have built in an approach that allows the timing to be split, and that allows the apprentice to cover different functions, work in different areas if they need to, or as I mentioned earlier, split between preparation and service. Innovate's role in this obviously is to provide the assessment workforce who will enter the employer premises and actually observe the apprentice carrying out their specific functions, carrying out their day-to-day, and allowing them to demonstrate all areas of the standard. And our assessors will score the observation against the grading criteria that's provided by People First. And there's that word grading again, and one of the key things that our customers have told us is that they'd like some more information about grading, how that will work, and how the assessment organisation will differentiate between a pass, a merit, and a distinction candidate in terms of all of these assessment methodologies, and of course the overall assessment grade at the end of the endpoint assessment. We will be working on that. We touch on grading briefly within this presentation, but we'll be working to produce some more detailed examples once we have them in place, and we'll make sure that all our customers are aware of exactly what an assessor will be looking for in the different grading examples that we're given. And finally, it's important just to recognise that no simulation is permitted. This has to be a real workplace assessment, and that's key. This is probably the type of assessment that many of our customers are really used to, but this kind of holistic element to it and this kind of synoptic approach is obviously going to be quite new and challenging for our customers. And that brings us to one of the standout assessment types, and this is the Culinary Challenge, which is only applied in the Commis chef standard. I'm sure many of you have looked at this, are aware of this, But of course, this is one of the most unique assessment approaches that we've seen, and one which we're obviously looking at the delivery detail of now. But some of the key information that you'll need to know is this must happen off-site or in a closed kitchen. And obviously that's an important logistical consideration in terms of if this is going to take place on the employer's premises. But we're also working with a number of different partners to identify appropriate assessment centres where apprentices can take this challenge in a suitable off-site location. And this is unsupported. So this is the apprentice working on their own to deliver the assessment requirements. Now, the observation happens across all 4 sections of the standard. It focuses on skills and creativity, and it looks at the apprentice working on a 2-course meal for 2 people in 2 hours. And they do have 30 minutes to familiarise themselves with their facilities, and to look at the requirements and to prepare, to visualise almost, but then they have 2 hours to actually prepare this 2-course meal. And that approach will be agreed at the planning meeting. So the apprentice will prepare a menu and a time plan which is looked at prior to the assessment. Now, the main course itself is based on a specification and a dish that is existing within the apprentice's organisation, and the dessert will stem from a base category that's suitable for the organisation themselves. So, as I said, this is one of the most challenging assessments in terms of logistical delivery, but we're very close to identifying how that will work, and of course our support will reflect the nature of this assessment, and we'll be looking at some real kind of key information there to really support our customers. And with that in mind, our practical observation offer, as discussed, will have guidance for all stakeholders, and that will include exemplars. We're looking at some really kind of innovative kind of solutions for demonstrating how those practical observations will work, what the apprentice will expect from the assessment approach. And also, as discussed, we're looking at the appropriate assessment centres, certainly in particular for the Commis Chef Culinary Challenge, so that they're available regionally, and of course a key part of that is to understand that the apprentices going into assessment centres really need to be able to familiarise themselves with the specification of the kitchens, and also with what it looks like in the mind's eye. So we're looking into some creative solutions to providing that information where perhaps apprentices might not get to actually experience those centres until the day of the assessment itself. And as discussed, early registration and pre-planning with our endpoint assessor is really important in terms of practical observation. It's written into the assessment plan. It's a key part of our thinking in terms of the guidance that we're preparing. Okay, the third and final assessment type that we want to cover in, actually the third of the 4, I apologise, that we're looking at is the business project. And you'll see here in terms of length, it's quite a diverse approach from level 2 to level 3. We know that it's not included within Commis Chef because the Culinary Challenge is the replacement for that. But essentially, it's the apprentice will look at a project which reflects an opportunity or a challenge or an idea which relates to business improvement. Examples that are given could be customer experience, reducing wastage, and that must be researched and written up within the 2-month assessment window. And then in the case of the level 3 standards, that must be followed up with a formal 30-minute presentation with a question and answer session. Now, in terms of the level 3 structures, obviously we're going to focus on that because that's a slightly longer approach to assessment. It will follow a basic structure, and Innovate will provide the template for that. But the length of the project can range from 2,000 to 5,000 words, with flexibility given on word count. Certainly, if and the apprentice can present information in different types, in different formats, and that's an important thing to consider. The apprentice should be given sufficient time to undertake the research and the writing of the project, and allocated a quiet room with IT facilities if required, within or away from the workplace, and that for the kind of the development of that project. And it's necessary for an apprentice to sign a statement confirming that they have been the author of the project using that standard template. Once the project is completed, the apprentice is required to submit the report to the independent endpoint assessor and the employer no less than 7 days in advance of the presentation. And that's important because that allows the assessor to look at what's been completed, to start the assessment process, but also to help to formalise the approach to the question and answer session. That presentation that will take place in a controlled environment, either on or off site, and again that's a quiet room away from the normal place of work. And the apprentice will need to have access to all of the equipment that they require to deliver that presentation. Now, just to focus on the different types of approaches to the synopsis that is required before the assessment is agreed, and then can start during the endpoint assessment window. For the hospitality team member, the apprentice will produce a 200 to 300 word proposal, and that must be agreed at the planning meeting. If it's not agreed for any reason, then the apprentice will have the opportunity to go away and reformulate that synopsis and then come back within a week. For the level 3, it's a more formal written type proposal that must be agreed at the planning meeting also, and the same rules apply in terms of if perhaps that's not considered appropriate. One of the key things that we will do as an assessment organisation is give some real guidance as to what is an appropriate proposal, some exemplars, some perhaps samples that we produce that help to inform the employer and the training provider in supporting the apprentice in terms of putting together that proposal, as that proposal starts within the training, beyond training program itself. Okay, it's been a slightly whistle-stop tour through the initial 3 assessment types that we've talked through. So what I propose we do is we're just going to take a 2-minute break just to look at some of the questions that are coming in before we move on to the professional discussion. Professional discussion element of the presentation. So, in terms of questions we've had come in, how long will the assessments take to deliver from the gateway? Now, I mentioned this briefly at the start, but there is a 2-month window from gateway to the end, and that's applied across all 4 of the standards we've talked about. Now, that doesn't mean it has to take 2 months. That's the maximum amount of time. And as I said, we're going to provide some indicative kind of guidance for that to support the process. And that's going to be available as early as possible so that the customers can understand what that looks like. And we've already discussed the order in which these will be looked at. Again, we won't be defining that process, but of course we'll be listening very carefully to our customers to understand which is the best order for that to happen. How will assessors be managed and allocated by Innovate? Again, endpoint assessment managers for hospitality will be a very important person in this process. They'll be the sector expert. They'll be responsible for managing the assessor teams, and they'll be the go-to person for all our customers and for our assessors in terms of EPA delivery and the content for the sectors. How much will endpoint assessment cost? Excuse me. Pretty much probably the most amount of questions we've had, and clearly very important. All of our prices will fall within the affordability statements that are published in the assessment plans for hospitality. We have indicative pricing available now, and of course we're happy to discuss this with you. There's contact details that come in at the end of this presentation that will give us an opportunity to put you in the right direction, and please do not hesitate to contact us. So moving on, I see there's plenty of questions still coming in, so we're sure we'll tackle some more at the end. Let's talk a bit about the professional discussion. Okay. So the professional discussion is a structured discussion between the apprentice and the independent endpoint assessor. Now, that's the consistent approach across all of the standards for hospitality, and actually the majority of the standards that we're delivering in other sectors all apply the same approach and all have a professional discussion that's included. Now, the employer may be present at the discussion to provide further examples and support, but not to lead the apprentice. And that's obviously an important consideration. And we'll have some guidance as to how that will work. And that won't just be written kind of policy and procedure. We'll have some real kind of interactive and in-depth kind of guidance provided through various different formats that help the apprentice to understand what the expectation will be for a professional discussion. The employer does not score the discussion. That is solely the remit of Innovate's endpoint assessor. It's likely, and it's very much part of our kind of policy and the way we want to work, that the endpoint assessor who's conducting the professional discussion will be the same person who conducted the practical observation and marked the business project. It's very important to us that there's a consistency of approach to the people delivering the assessment for us, so that when the apprentice comes to take their final professional discussion, there's an element of comfort with the person who they're working with, but also the assessor is aware of the background of the apprentice and what they've done through their other assessment approaches. And that allows the endpoint assessor to ask the apprentice questions in relation to the period of learning, development, continuous assessment, how they've covered the standard, and personal development and reflection. The apprentice will be informed of the requirements prior to the discussion, and that will come at least 5 days in advance. And they may also bring with them additional materials to help them demonstrate their competence. The discussion itself, and this is really important, will be appropriately structured to draw out the best of the apprentice's energy, enthusiasm, competence and excellence, and in that way best give them the chance to achieve at the top of the grade profile for that professional discussion. Now that's the consistent approach that's applied. You'll see that actually there are some elements of similarity. Difference in time approach for level 2 and level 3, much like the multiple choice test and the practical observation, 40 minutes for team member and Commis chef, which includes 10 minutes in respect of team member to present on the business project, and for the Commis chef to review their recipe log that they use for their culinary challenge, and to look at the log of dishes that's been prepared in the workplace. You'll see there that the remaining elements are pretty consistent. And of course, our assessors will be trained in delivery of effective professional discussions, and as discussed, the support that we offer is vital for this this pretty consistent and obviously really important final component of the assessment plan. Okay, so we have another question for you. Now, instead of choosing from a poll here, what I'd like to do is just to get some of your ideas through the question format that we have, and just give us your ideas as to what sort of support material do you think will be really important for the assessment methodologies that we've identified, and I encourage you to think outside of the box here. Just give us some of your ideas as to the support material Innovate should be thinking about in terms of the assessment methods that we've presented today. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to do so, and for me to see the questions that come in, and in that respect, I'll talk through some of the responses you've given. And whilst you're doing that, what I'm going to do is just talk through some of the other questions that we've had that have come through. Can any of the meetings be held via Skype or other kind of video conferencing tools? Very much so. That's certainly something that we're looking at, and we'd look to utilise through our assessment approaches, certainly for the planning meeting, but also within other assessment methodologies that we're looking at. Do Innovate costs include the EQA fee, the external quality assurance fee from People First? Yes, they do. They're built into our costs to our customers, and not charged as an additional extra. An important thing to consider there. Does the project have to be completed in a test environment, or is this done by the learner in their own time? It doesn't have to be taken in a test environment. It's a research project. They do have to be given an appropriate amount of time and the area to look at the research of it, and they do have to show that it is their own work. But it doesn't have to be taken in a test environment. Okay, so I think we're running towards the end of the session, so we'll share all of the responses that we've had with things like video showing exemplars, very important. They'll be very nervous, so the the answers just coming through. How can we help with this? Certainly something that we're looking at. Guidance on grading. Again, I think that's incredibly important to show what the difference is between a distinction candidate and also a merit and a pass candidate. So some very useful things fed in there, which we'll, of course we'll take away and utilise in terms of the later stages of our phase development approach. So let's move towards the end of the presentation to make sure that everyone can get away on time. We'll just look. I'm just going to look at the grading approach. that we've talked about. And again, this is very kind of standard information that is available through People First. But the multiple choice question test will be based on a percentage pass mark with a 70% pass and over 85% relating to distinction. Now clearly we'll have much more detail in terms of what that looks like, but at the moment it's just important to consider that it's very much a grading based on pass mark kind of approach that is in place. Practical observations will be based on the assessor grading competence against assessment criteria, and you'll see in the information there that the assessors will make their grading decisions using observation templates, and of course those templates can be used as an approach for our support material to show exemplars for customers to understand how we look at the grading process. The business project, again, this is based on the criteria that People First provide. There must be a passing of all the competencies identified in the assessment plans as standard, but in addition, to achieve a distinction, the apprentices must achieve additional competencies. And again, these are all included within the current assessment plans available through People First, and encourage you to have a look at that in more detail to help with your initial understanding. And of course, we'll help customers through the process also. Similar approach to the professional discussion, where the assessor will assess the apprentice against competencies identified, and then the distinction relating to the past competencies plus those additional that additional evidence where requested. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour through grading. Who's going to be carrying out that grading process? Now, there's key criteria that our assessors will look like, and we will make sure that all of our assessor workforce will be managed through an endpoint assessment manager. They will be independent, they'll be fair, they'll be impartial, they will have industry experience, they will be experienced in the assessment of the standard, of working in the standard that the apprentice is being assessed in. They will be under contract to Innovate to deliver that assessment, so they'll be working within our policies, within our procedures, and we will ensure that they meet the criteria that the external quality assurer has laid down in terms of the assessors for hospitality, and they will have up-to-date occupational experience. They will maintain their CPD whilst they work as an assessor for these standards. They will hold the appropriate workplace assessment qualifications, and beyond any of that, their communication skills and their ability to work and manage the assessment process with a number of different stakeholders will be vital, and they must be a top-notch communicator, and they will really have to excel in this area. As we talked about, the costs will fall within the affordability statement set within each assessment plan. The list prices are available now, and of course we can talk about volumes and other factors in terms of our discussions. So we'll be delighted to do so. Contact us at the epa@innovateawarding.org email address to discuss these, or of course please do contact me directly on the telephone numbers included within this final slide here. Now, I think we've pretty much taken up the whole hour. So in terms of, just to wrap up things, questions, Kathy has been answering a number of questions directly. We've also, we'll be adding all of your feedback to our frequently asked questions that will be also broken down on a sector level. We will make sure that information is available as soon as possible. This webinar will be sent out to all those who registered as a recording, all things going well. And of of course, we will be putting this up on our website as soon as we've checked it and made sure that everything is in order and working. So don't expect the recording to come out straight away, but once we've quality assured it and assured that it covers everything we in the right way and actually has the full hour, we'll make sure that's available to you. So thank you very much for your time. Please do contact us. Thanks for all your questions, and the next webinar will be related to the adult care standards, so please do tell colleagues, and that will be on the 24th of March at the same time. So thanks again for your time.